Adequacy and Equity in Education. The goals of this presentation are to define the terms adequacy and equity as they relate to school finance, to provide a brief historical overview identifying states and legislation that led to change in school funding, and to look at adequacy and equity in today's educational environment. I've often said that after 200 years as a country, it looks like we would have figured out how to teach kids. That was before I took a finance class. In the 1950s, America began to question the fairness and sufficiency of segregated schools and an education system in which funding favored white schools. In 1957, this culminated in the now landmark case of Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, Kansas. 62 years later, and we still wage battles to determine what fairness or equity and sufficiency or adequacy look like as we at times struggle to finance schools. So what's the problem? Let's take a look. Achievement gaps between minority and white students and low income and upper middle class students still exist and by some measures continues to grow. If schools are not adequately and equitably funded, then students that attend those schools aren't being prepared for their roles as productive citizens. In turn, we all suffer as a nation. The lower the quality of a person's education, the worse their chances of getting and maintaining jobs in which they will pay taxes. The result is that those who do pay higher taxes. It would seem then that it would behoove us to correct the problem. For instance, according to IDRA.org, every $1 spent on education produces at least $9 in future savings and increased income and tax revenues. This has obviously caused division and much discussion about what it means for schools to be adequately and equitably funded. A basic definition of the terms give us some direction but rarely help as they apply to educational funding. Do we really want minimum requirements when it comes to educating our children? And we mustn't confuse equity with equality. Let's see how they relate to financing schools. All children deserve an opportunity for the best education possible, regardless of race, ethnicity, income status, or zip code. Equity in public education means that all students will be treated fairly. What is fair to one student may not be fair to another. For instance, a student in one of Georgia's poorest districts may require more funding than does one in Georgia's richest. As well, it is likely to cost more to serve students with special needs. Let's look at a historical overview. It happened in three waves. The first wave was from 1960 into 1973. The second wave from 1973 to 1989, and the third wave continues today, and it started in '89. In the first wave, the argument would be that education is a fundamental right under the 14th Amendment's Equal Protection Clause. There was very little success in the first wave as courts decided that educational matters were reserved for states. This led plaintiffs to take up their fight with states. 49 of the 50 had equal protection clauses and guaranteed a free education. Mississippi stood alone. There was some success, but it was limited. In 1989, with Rose versus the Council for a Better Education, the dam began to break and the battle wages on. Increasingly, states are being held to a standard of funding adequate and equitable schools for all students. A few of the decisions came in court cases: San Antonio Independent School District versus Rodriguez, and Serrano versus Priest in 1971. Rose versus Accounts for a Better Education again began to see a change in how schools would be funded. What does adequacy and equity look like today? This map tells an eye-opening story. All one has to do is to compare the white dots to the dark red ones. The white ones are schools that have a B or better as a school grade. Dark red ones are failing schools. Comparing the percentage of students living in poverty and the percentage of black and Hispanics in these different categories show that we have a way to go before we fix the adequacy and equity problems facing our nation. Let's take a look at a couple of these. This is Clay County Elementary School. It has a school grade of D, and it's 82% poverty rating, 94% black with 0 Hispanics. Has a CCRPI score of 63.6. Now let's go down and look at this school, which is Jerger Elementary School. It has a school grade of B. Only a poverty percentage of 14%. It has 16% blacks and 3% Hispanics. This is Banks County High School, school at which I work. We have a school grade of B and a percent poverty rating according to the state of 23%. 3% black, 9% Hispanics with a CCRPI score of 89.1%. The table to the right also shows us a breakdown of schools who graded poorly were very high in poverty, and those who graded good, A, had very little poverty. There are two quotes that kind of sum up this whole thing for me, and it looks like we're in a mess. I feel as if the purpose of this class was to let me know that I will never understand school finance. I realize that getting FTE counts correct, writing grants, and pinching pennies within a school budget are invaluable, but wow. We spend more than ever, and yet achievements continue to widen. Some schools are adequate, others are excellent, while others struggle. New ESSE legislation demands equal opportunities for all students. As this is implemented, there is a hope that at last we will have this figured out. As educators, we have a responsibility to students, parents, communities, and our nation as a whole to develop our human capital. Thank you.